There are people who walk through life collecting faces like postcards. They smile at strangers, shake hands with acquaintances, exchange pleasantries with colleagues. And yet, beneath all those interactions, beneath all those words and gestures, they remain fundamentally unknown. Not because they hide themselves intentionally, but because most of us have forgotten how to truly see. We live in a world obsessed with appearances. We measure people by their accomplishments, their possessions, their social media presence. We judge them by their words, their promises, their carefully curated stories. But character, true character, exists in a dimension most eyes never reach. It lives in the spaces between words. It breathes in the moments when no one is watching. It reveals itself not in grand declarations, but in quiet consistencies that most people are too distracted to notice. Thomas Merton understood something profound about human nature. He knew that to truly know someone's character, you don't need to analyze their entire life story. You don't need to conduct extensive interviews or background checks. You need only to pay attention to two things, two simple things that most people overlook every single day. And once you learn to see these two things, you'll never look at people the same way again. The first thing is this. Watch how someone treats those who can do nothing for them. It sounds simple, doesn't it? Almost too simple. But this single observation contains more truth about human nature than entire libraries of psychology books. Because when someone interacts with a person who holds no power over them, who offers no social advantage, no networking opportunity, no potential benefit, that's when the mask falls away. That's when you see what's actually there beneath the performance. Think about it. How does someone speak to the waiter who serves their table? Not when they're on a first date trying to impress, but on an ordinary Tuesday when no one important is watching. How do they treat the janitor who cleans their office? The elderly person struggling with groceries in the parking lot? The homeless individual asking for spare change? The customer service representative on the other end of a frustrating phone call? These moments are windows into the soul. Because in these interactions, there's no incentive to pretend. There's no reward for kindness except the kindness itself. There's no audience to perform for, no reputation to uphold, no future favor to secure. There's only the raw, unfiltered truth of who someone is when the social contract doesn't require them to care. I once knew someone who was beloved in our community. Charismatic, successful, always the first to volunteer for visible charitable causes. Everyone spoke highly of them. They gave inspiring speeches about compassion and human dignity. They posted eloquently on social media about treating all people with respect. Their public persona was impeccable. But I noticed something. I noticed how they spoke to servers in restaurants, with barely concealed impatience, as if these people were merely obstacles between them and their meal. I noticed how they ignored the security guard who greeted them every morning, never once acknowledging his existence. I noticed how they complained loudly about incompetent workers whenever someone made a small mistake, how they seemed to view anyone in a service position as somehow less than human. And I realized this person wasn't kind. They were strategic. Their compassion wasn't a core value. It was a tool they wielded when it served their interests. The moment someone couldn't advance their status or stroke their ego, that person became invisible to them. Or worse, became an object of contempt. This is what Merton understood. That genuine goodness doesn't calculate, it doesn't measure the worthiness of its recipient before deciding whether to appear. It simply exists, like sunlight that falls on everyone equally, regardless of whether they're king or beggar, useful or useless, powerful or powerless. When you watch how someone treats those who can do nothing for them, you're not watching their social skills or their political savvy, you're watching their actual character. You're seeing the person they are when no one is keeping score. A truly good person treats the CEO and the custodian with the same fundamental respect. Not because it's strategic, but because they've internalized a simple truth. Every human being you encounter is living a life as complex and real as your own. Everyone is fighting battles you know nothing about. Everyone deserves to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be treated with basic human dignity. This doesn't mean everyone will like you. It doesn't mean you have to be everyone's best friend or solve everyone's problems. It means you recognize the humanity in people, even when, especially when, those people hold no power over you. But here's where it gets more complex, more subtle. Because some people do treat everyone with surface-level politeness. They're nice to waiters and janitors. They smile at strangers. They say please and thank you. And yet, something still feels hollow. Something still feels performed. Which brings us to the second thing. Watch what someone does when they think no one will ever know. This is the deeper test, the one that cuts through even the most sophisticated disguises, because it's relatively easy to be kind when there's an audience. Even an audience of one, it's relatively easy to do the right thing when someone might find out. But what happens in the complete absence of witnesses? What happens when there's no possibility of recognition, no chance of reward, no risk of consequences? This is where true character lives. In the decisions made in absolute privacy, in the choices no one will ever applaud, in the moments when you could get away with something and no one would ever be the wiser. Do they return the extra change when a cashier makes a mistake in their favor? Do they tell the truth on their taxes when they know the chances of an audit are minimal? Do they keep their commitments even when breaking them would be easy and undetectable? Do they resist small temptations when indulging them would leave no trace? More than that, do they do good things when there's zero possibility anyone will ever know? Do they pick up trash in an empty park? Do they leave encouraging notes for strangers who will never know who wrote them? Do they donate anonymously to causes they believe in? Do they help people in ways that ensure they'll never receive credit? I'm not talking about grand gestures. I'm talking about the tiny, invisible choices that comprise a life. The moments when cutting a corner would save time and no one would notice. The moments when taking credit for someone else's work would advance your career and the truth would never surface. The moments when a small dishonesty would solve a problem cleanly and the lie would never be discovered. These are the moments that define us. Not the moments on stage, but the moments in the wings. Not the moments when the spotlight is on, but the moments in complete darkness when the only witness is our own conscience. There's a story about a teacher who noticed one of her students staying after class each day, carefully straightening all the desks and picking up any trash left behind. She watched for weeks before finally asking him why he did this. The student seemed surprised by the question. "The custodian is elderly," he said simply. "I thought it might make his job a little easier." He wasn't doing it for recognition. He wasn't doing it for grades or praise. He was doing it because he'd noticed someone who could use help, and he had the power to provide it. No audience necessary. No reward expected. That's character. That's the real thing. And here's what's beautiful and terrifying about these two measures. They're almost impossible to fake consistently over time. Someone can perform kindness for an audience. They can cultivate a reputation for integrity. They can manage their image carefully. But eventually, in unguarded moments, in interactions with powerless people, in decisions made in private darkness, the truth emerges. You can't sustain a false character indefinitely. The mask always slips. The performance always breaks down, because pretending to be good requires constant vigilance, constant effort. But being good, actually being good, requires no effort at all. It's simply who you are. This is why Merton's insight is so powerful. It cuts through all the complexity, all the noise, all the carefully constructed personas. It says, don't listen to what people claim about themselves. Don't be dazzled by their achievements or their eloquence. Don't be fooled by their public displays of virtue. Instead, watch quietly, watch carefully. Watch how they treat those who don't matter. Watch what they do when they think no one is looking. And what you'll discover is this. There are people who are genuinely kind, and there are people who are performing kindness. There are people with integrity, and there are people who wear integrity like a costume. There are people who do good because they are good, and people who do good because they want to be seen as good. The difference is everything. But here's where this gets uncomfortable. Because if these two things reveal character in others, they also reveal character in ourselves. And most of us, if we're honest, will find aspects of ourselves we'd rather not see. How do you treat people who can do nothing for you? Really? In your most tired, stressed, frustrated moments, when you're running late and someone is moving too slowly, when you're overwhelmed and someone needs your help, When you're focused on your own concerns and someone interrupts with theirs, how do you treat them? Do you see them as fully human, as complex and real as yourself? Or do they become obstacles, annoyances, NPCs in the video game of your life? And what do you do when no one is watching? When you find money that could easily be pocketed? When you could blame your mistake on someone else? When you could take credit you didn't earn? When you could break a promise and face no consequences? What do you do? Do you hold yourself to your values even when it costs you something and benefits you nothing? Or do your principles evaporate the moment they become inconvenient? These are hard questions. They require the kind of honesty that most of us spend our lives avoiding. Because it's easier to believe we're good people than to examine the evidence of our actual behavior. It's easier to focus on our intentions than our actions. It's easier to judge others by their mistakes while judging ourselves by our ideals. But growth, real growth, requires us to close that gap, to become the person we imagine ourselves to be, to align our private choices with our public values, to treat people consistently, whether they're powerful or powerless, present or absent, watching or blind. This is hard work. It's the work of a lifetime, because character isn't something you achieve once and then possess forever. It's something you practice daily, moment by moment, choice by choice. It's built in the accumulation of small decisions that seem insignificant in isolation, but form the foundation of who you actually are. And here's what I've learned. The people with the strongest character are often the ones who struggle most visibly with these questions. They're not the ones loudly proclaiming their virtue. They're the ones quietly examining their behavior, acknowledging their failures, working to do better. They're the ones who understand that being good isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest about where you fall short and committed to closing the distance. They're the ones who treat the barista with patience even when they're late for work, because they know that person's dignity doesn't depend on their own convenience. They're the ones who admit mistakes even when they could get away with hiding them, because they understand that integrity means more than reputation. They're the ones who do small kindnesses in secret, not because they're saints, but because they've decided that's the kind of person they want to be. And gradually, almost imperceptibly, those small choices compound. They become habits. The habits become character, and character becomes destiny. You become someone who instinctively treats people well, not because you're performing goodness, but because goodness is what you've practiced until it became natural. You become someone whose private behavior and public behavior align, not because you're being watched, but because you've internalized your values so deeply that they guide you automatically. This is freedom. Real freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want without consequences, but the freedom that comes from being the same person in every context. No more exhausting performance, no more fear of being exposed, no more gap between who you are and who you pretend to be. Just consistency. Just integrity. Just the simple peace of knowing that who you are in the dark is who you are in the light. But there's something else here, something Merton understood deeply. These two measures of character, how we treat the powerless and what we do unseen, they're not just about morality, they're about awareness. They're about whether we're actually awake to the reality around us, or whether we're sleepwalking through life, seeing other people only as they relate to us, as they serve or obstruct our purposes. To truly see how someone treats those who can do nothing for them, you first have to see those people at all. You have to notice the custodian, the server, the stranger. You have to recognize that their experience is real, that their dignity matters, that their humanity exists independently of your needs. This is rare. Most people move through the world in a bubble of self-absorption so complete they barely register the existence of anyone outside it. Other people are background characters, stage dressing, supporting cast in the drama of their own lives. They're not cruel intentionally, they're simply asleep, simply unaware that consciousness exists anywhere but in their own skull. To develop true character, you must wake up. You must learn to see. You must expand your circle of moral consideration beyond yourself, beyond your loved ones, beyond your tribe, until it encompasses every human being you encounter, regardless of their utility to you. This is difficult. It's uncomfortable. Because once you truly see people, you can't unsee them. Once you recognize their humanity, you can't treat them as objects. Once you understand that everyone you meet is the protagonist of their own story, you can't reduce them to extras in yours. And this changes everything. It changes how you move through the world. It changes how you make decisions. It changes what matters to you and what you're willing to sacrifice for. It makes you kinder, yes, but more than that, it makes you real. It connects you to the actual world, the actual people, the actual experiences happening all around you. It pulls you out of the hall of mirrors of your own mind and drops you into the vast, complicated, beautiful mess of shared human existence. And from this place of genuine connection, genuine seeing, genuine awareness, character flows naturally. You treat people well not because you've memorized rules of etiquette, but because you see them. You act with integrity in private, not because you fear punishment, but because you've recognized that your choices matter, that they ripple outward, that they shape the world whether anyone knows about them or not. This is what Merton was pointing to. Not just rules for how to behave, but an entire way of being in the world. A way of seeing clearly, acting honestly, living fully awake to the weight and wonder of our shared existence. And here's the gift. When you develop this kind of character, when you become this kind of person, something unexpected happens. You stop worrying so much about whether you're good enough. You stop performing for an imaginary audience. You stop exhausting yourself trying to manage everyone's perception of you. Because you know who you are. You know it in your bones, in your choices, in the quiet moments when no one is watching. You've aligned your inner world with your outer world. You've closed the gap between image and reality. You've become integrated, whole, real, and people sense this, not consciously perhaps, but they feel it. They feel the absence of performance, the presence of authenticity. They feel safe around you because they sense you see them, really see them, not as tools or obstacles, but as fellow human beings navigating this strange existence. They trust you, often without knowing why. Because trust isn't primarily about competence or reliability, though those matter. Trust is about sensing that someone will treat you well even when it doesn't benefit them. Trust is about knowing that someone will do the right thing even when no one is watching. Trust is about character, real character, the kind that reveals itself in how you treat the powerless and what you do unseen. So pay attention, not just to others, but to yourself. Watch your own behavior in those telling moments. Notice when you're tempted to treat someone poorly, because they don't matter to your goals. Notice when you're tempted to cut corners because no one will know. Notice the gap between who you want to be and who you actually are in those moments. And then, gently but firmly, close that gap. Not through self-flagellation or harsh judgment, but through practice. Through choosing differently next time. Through treating the next powerless person you encounter with dignity. Through doing the right thing in the next private moment, even when it costs you something. Do this once, then do it again, and again, and again. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you'll change. You'll become someone whose character isn't a performance, but a reality. Someone whose goodness isn't conditional, but essential. Someone who can be trusted completely because there's no gap between who they appear to be and who they actually are. This is the work. This is the path. This is how you build a life of meaning and integrity. Not through grand gestures or public proclamations, not through careful image management or strategic positioning, but through 10,000 small choices made in ordinary moments when no one is watching and no one can help you. Through seeing people, through being honest, through staying true to your values when it would be easier not to. Through remembering again and again that the kind of person you are in private is the kind of person you actually are. And in the end, isn't that what matters most? Not what others think of you, not what you've accomplished or acquired, not the image you've projected or the reputation you've cultivated, but who you actually are, who you are when the mask comes off, who you are in the dark, who you are when only your conscience is watching. This is the person you have to live with forever. This is the person you see in the mirror when you strip away all pretense. This is the person who knows the truth about all your choices, all your compromises, all the moments when you chose convenience over character. Make that person someone you can respect. Make that person someone you'd want to know. Make that person someone whose reflection you can meet without flinching. That's the real work. That's the real achievement. Not becoming successful or admired or influential, but becoming good. Genuinely good. Consistently good. Good in ways that no one will ever recognize or reward or even notice. Good because it's who you've decided to be. And here's the beautiful secret. When you commit to this path, when you make character the central project of your life, everything else becomes simpler. Not easier, necessarily, but simpler. Because you're no longer juggling multiple versions of yourself, trying to remember which mask to wear for which audience. You're just being yourself. The same self, in every situation, with every person. There's a profound relief in this, a lightness, a freedom that comes from having nothing to hide because there's nothing to hide from. Your private life and public life align. Your words and actions match. Your values and behavior synchronize. You become integrated, whole, real. And this ultimately is what Merton understood about character. It's not about performing virtue or collecting good deeds like merit badges. It's about becoming a person whose goodness is so thoroughly integrated into their being that it expresses itself automatically, unconsciously, in every interaction and every choice. It's about reaching a point where treating people with dignity isn't something you have to remember to do. It's simply how you interact with the world. Where doing the right thing in private isn't a struggle against temptation. It's just what you do, because integrity has become who you are, not something you have to maintain. This is the goal. This is the destination. Not moral perfection. That's an illusion, a trap. But moral consistency, becoming someone whose character is reliable, whose behavior is predictable, whose goodness can be counted on. Becoming someone who treats the powerless with dignity and does the right thing unseen. Not sometimes, not when it's convenient, but always, automatically, naturally, because it's who you've become. Pay attention to these two things in others, yes. They'll tell you everything you need to know about who someone really is. But pay attention to these two things in yourself. They'll tell you everything you need to know about who you're becoming. And then, moment by moment, choice by choice, interaction by interaction, become the person you want to be. Not the person you claim to be or wish to be or pretend to be, the person you actually are. In the end, that's all that matters. That's all that lasts. That's all that's real. Everything else is just performance, just smoke and mirrors, just elaborate theater we stage for an audience that isn't really paying attention anyway. But character, real character, that's substance. That's foundation. That's the bedrock on which a meaningful life is built. So watch how people treat those who can do nothing for them. Watch what people do when they think no one is watching, and watch yourself in those same moments, because these two things will tell you everything. About them. About you. About what really matters in this brief, precious existence we're all navigating together. And once you learn to see clearly, once you commit to living with integrity, once you align who you are with who you want to be, you'll discover something remarkable. You'll discover that the weight of pretense you've been carrying, the exhaustion of performance you've been enduring, the anxiety of maintaining an image you've been managing, all of it can be set down. You can simply be. Flawed, yes. Imperfect, certainly. But real. Authentic. Whole. And there's a peace in that realness, a freedom in that authenticity, a lightness in that wholeness that no amount of success or admiration or influence can provide. This is the gift of character. This is what Merton understood. Not rules to follow or standards to meet, but an invitation to wake up, to see clearly, to live honestly, to become real, in how you treat those who can do nothing for you, in what you do when no one is watching, in every small choice that seems inconsequential but isn't, in every moment that defines who you're becoming. This is the path. This is the way. This is the work that matters most. Everything else is just noise. But this is signal. This is substance. This is real. So pay attention to others, to yourself, to the gap between who you are and who you're capable of being, and then, gently but persistently, close that gap. one choice at a time, one interaction at a time, one private moment at a time, until there's no gap left, until you're simply who you are consistently in every context, until character isn't something you have or display or perform, but something you are, completely, authentically, really. That's the destination. That's the achievement. That's the life worth living. Not the one that looks good from the outside, but the one that feels good from the inside. The one built on truth, on integrity, on genuine goodness that requires no audience and seeks no applause. The one where you can meet your own eyes in the mirror and know without doubt or pretense who's looking back at you. Someone real, someone whole, someone who treats others with dignity and does right by their conscience. Not perfect, never perfect, but real. And in the end, that's enough. That's everything. That's all any of us can truly offer to this world. Our real selves, our true character, our honest, flawed, beautiful humanity. Revealed in how we treat those who can do nothing for us. Expressed in what we do when no one is watching. Moment by moment, choice by choice, day by day, until the performance falls away and only the person remains, real, whole, free. This is the wisdom, this is the path. This is what truly matters. Everything else will fade. But character, real character that lasts, in how others remember you, in how you remember yourself, in the world you leave behind. So pay attention to these two things, in everyone you meet, in yourself most of all. They'll tell you everything you need to know about who people really are, about who you're becoming, about what it means to live with integrity in a world that so often values appearance over substance. These two simple things. Watch how someone treats those who can do nothing for them. Watch what someone does when they think no one will ever know, and you'll see character revealed. True character, the kind that can't be faked or performed or disguised, the kind that defines a life, the kind that matters most, the kind that transforms not just how we live, but who we become. This is the gift Merton offers us. Not answers, but attention. Not rules, but awareness. Not judgment, but invitation. An invitation to see clearly, to live honestly, to become real, in every interaction, in every choice, in every moment when no one is watching. This is where character lives. This is where life gets real. This is where we discover who we actually are beneath all the performance and pretense. And from that place of honest self-knowing, that foundation of integrated character, we can finally build something real, something lasting, something true, a life of meaning, a life of integrity, a life that matters not because of what it achieves, but because of who it becomes. This is the path. This is the invitation. Will you pay attention? Will you see clearly? Will you live honestly? Will you close the gap between who you are and who you're capable of being? The choice, as always, is yours, but the opportunity is here, now. In every interaction with powerless people, in every private moment when no one is watching, in every chance to become a little more real, a little more whole, a little more genuinely good. Not for applause, not for recognition, not for reward, but for yourself, for your conscience, for the person you have to live with forever. That's who this work is really for. That's who ultimately benefits from character. You, the real you, the one who knows the truth about all your choices. Make that person proud. Make that person someone you'd want to know. Make that person real. Because in the end, that's all any of us are doing here. Learning to be real, learning to be whole, learning to close the gap between image and reality until they're the same thing, until we're simply who we are. Everywhere. Always. With everyone. That's freedom. That's integrity. That's what character actually means. And it begins with paying attention to these two things. How you treat those who can do nothing for you. What you do when you think no one is watching. Right now. Today. In this moment. The work begins, the work continues, the work transforms everything, not someday, now. That's the wisdom. That's the truth. That's the path. Everything else is just noise. But this is real.